next hear from Dean Baker, who's the co-founder and co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Dean is able to claim on his resume that he called both the internet stock bubble and the housing bubble at times when it was popular and a minority view, at least in the economist profession, to do that. He's recently the author of False Profits, Recovering from the Bubble Economy, and one of the leading economic exponents of a financial speculation tax.
And so, Alan Greenspan refers to me as nobody. When Rob made the comment about Paul having been responsible for helping to bring down the price of AIDS drugs by 99%, I remembered President Bush at one point was extolling the virtues of capitalism, and he talked about how we got down the price of AIDS drugs by 99%. And of course, we all know it wasn't the great innovations in AIDS drugs that we got rid of the patent protection. That was what we had to do that. So, anyhow, I don't usually hang out with such good company, such an illustrious panel. I tend to hang out with more low-life characters, economists. So what I want to talk about are some of the objections that my usual company would raise to the financial transactions tax. First, international coordination. Secondly, they'll raise issues about mechanical difficulties. Third, they tend to minimize the money raised. And then lastly, I just want to make one final point as to why I think this is a really good idea in addition to the others that have been raised. First off, the international coordination issue. I get a big kick out of this because we do all sorts of things in this country all the time, and no one talks about international coordination. We're going to debate the tax code. We're going to talk about international coordination. Is that going to be arranged with the G20? We change our patent law. We're always mindful of it, of course. But no one says, oh, should we change the tax code? Let's go to the G20 and do that. This idea that somehow you have this, we set an impossibly high bar. Now, I'm not belittling international coordination. I think it's great. But you don't want to set up a bar that you know is impossible. Are we going to have a meeting of the G20 next week and we're all going to come out and they're all going to agree and this is the tax structure everyone's going to impose? Of course not. And if that's the bar, then let's not waste everyone's time. It's not going to happen. But we don't have to do things that way. We don't do things that way. And just, my case study here as to why this is just a silly, silly thing. It can't be done without international coordination. There is a country some people have heard of, the United Kingdom. Okay, they've had a tax on stock transfers. I've been trying to find out how far back it goes. I saw somewhere, I don't know if it's continuous, but the first record I could find was 1694. Okay, they tax stock transfers. It's only on stock. It's not derivatives, futures, whatever other assets we'd like to have taxed. They raised the equivalent of about 0.3% of GDP. That'd be $40 billion a year in the United States. Okay, so is it possible to do it in one country? Well, unless the UK doesn't exist, or I had a big argument, someone's getting really angry saying, you don't understand international finance. I go, you're not arguing with me. You got to tell England. They think they're raising a lot of money this way. So it works. It can be done. We'd much rather have international coordination, but obviously it can be done. We don't have to argue about that. Now, in terms of the international coordination, again, we have kind of this story that you all know, the Incredible Hulk. The mild-mannered scientist gets angry and becomes Incredible Hulk. Well, when the United States wants something done internationally, we're the Incredible Hulk. We want to go to war in Iraq. We want to crack down on terrorism. I've talked to other people. Been at these meetings. We imposed all sorts of bank rules on England, on Germany, on France, because we wanted to track funds that could go to terrorism. They said this is inconsistent with laws. Change your laws, and they did. But when you talk about an international financial transactions tax, financial speculation tax, oh no, they won't go along. Now the other part of that story is, what's really strange is many of them are on record. We've had the finance ministers or prime ministers of the UK, of France, of Germany, many other countries. They all say they're for it. So somehow we get all these people going into the room. They're all for it going in, and then couldn't get it through. Maybe we need cameras. I don't know. Because it doesn't seem to make sense. So this whole idea of international coordination, this is really just silliness. That's not an obstacle. We want to have more coordination, but it's not an obstacle. It's not a reason we can't do it. Okay, second point, mechanical difficulties. Yeah, everything's difficult, but let's put this in context. What we care about, if we have someone here, they want to change they want a $1,000 stock trade or whatever, and they find a way to slip it in, we don't care about that. We care about George Soros trading hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. Now let's contrast this for a second with copyrights. Because copyrights is, someone's downloading their song illegally or movie or whatever. That's billions of tiny transactions. Now, copyright is hard to enforce, but the fact of the matter is, Microsoft, Bill Gates, they're very rich. Disney, we can name the companies, Time Warner, we have lots of money that is still made on copyright enforcement. The difficulties of enforcing copyright, where you have to talk about billions, perhaps trillions of tiny transactions, enforcing a financial transactions tax where we're concerned about a relatively small number of very large transactions, come on, let's be serious. As long as we still have copyrights in the world, don't waste your time telling me we can't enforce the financial transactions tax. And one of the things the UK does that's very effective, you have it's called a stamp tax. You don't own the asset unless you've paid the tax. So, if you're George Soros or you're some trader and you just bought, $100 million of stock, well, you don't actually own that stock unless you can show you paid the tax. It's a real simple thing. I think most, no one's going to like paying the tax, but on the other hand, they want to own the asset. They don't want to throw their money in the toilet. So they're going to pay the tax, I think, in most cases. The other thing I say, and I've gotten a lot of people laughing at, but I think it's a perfectly reasonable policy. Generally, my guess, I don't know for certain, but my guess is George Soros doesn't do his trades himself. In other words, he has people working for him. So you offer a simple reward, 10% of the money collected. So I suspect there's a lot of people, and I'm sure George Soros is a nice guy, but there's probably a lot of speculators that aren't. And you get 10% of the money collected if you turn in your boss for not paying the tax. We do that in other contexts. Why not? Why not? So this idea that somehow this is something impossible to collect, it's just absurd. The third point, again, I've had arguments with people, well, you really wouldn't raise very much money. Very much means different things in different contexts. Okay, so again, we have the example of UK, 0.3% of GDP. That's 40 billion a year. The Obama administration's proposed their bank tax, which is supposed to raise 90 billion over 10 years. That's 40 billion a year just taxing stocks. Now, I've done some work with my friend Bob Paul at the University of Massachusetts. We assume that you get more than 50% reduction in trading volume, you would still raise over 150 billion a year. Okay, so the idea you wouldn't raise a lot of money, that just seems a little silly. Now, in terms of who would bear the cost, well, the bills that are before Congress now, one in the House by Peter DeFazio and one in the Senate sponsored by Tom Harkin in Iowa, those actually exempt most pension funds' ordinary trades. The other point to keep in mind is even if you didn't exempt them, what they keep yelling, the story we keep saying, hearing, and of course what we want, there'd be a reduction in trading volume. So as a simple, this is a rule of thumb, it's not exact. Let's say we double the cost of trading, which is roughly what this would do, depending more or less with some assets, but roughly double it. Well, you cut trading volume by roughly 50%. That's roughly what the evidence shows. Well, you trade half as much, you pay twice as much to trade. That's a wash. Okay, Wall Street's unhappy because that's their profits. Okay, but if I'm someone with a 401k, I've got 100,000 in there, it's my pension fund, and they cut their trades in half because it costs more to trade. That's what we expect would happen. They're paying just as much on trades now as they did before. Now, it's not going to be exactly a wash, of course it won't be, but that's ballpark what we're talking about. So the people who are really going to bear this, on the one hand, the industry conducting the trades, the other hand, the speculators that aren't trading by the hour, by the minute, they're going to bear the cost. Which brings me to my last point, and this is important, how we think about the financial industry. The financial industry is an intermediate good. No one directly gets utility from, and it's not value driven. I mean, it's just like, we understand, we want a house because we live in the house, we want a car, we want food, medical care. These are all things that directly provide utility. Finance makes it easier for us to get the house, right? I would take out a mortgage, or car loan, or whatever. Finance has its place in the economy. But it's an intermediate good. It's like trucking. Now, in principle, we want as small a financial sector as possible. Just as we want as small a trucking sector as possible. We need goods brought from point A to point B. Now, what's actually happened in the U.S. economy over the last 3 decades is the financial sector, narrowly described, investment banking, securities, commodities trading, that's quintupled as a share of GDP. It's gone from about 0.5% of private sector GDP in the 70s to about 2.5% of private sector GDP today. That, in my view, is total waste. Unless you can show what we've got, is capital being better allocated, are we more secure in our savings? Unless you can tell me that. Maybe you can tell me that, but I think that's a hard stretch. That is total waste. If we can wheedle this sector down to size, we've done a great thing both because I don't want these people running our government, but also we've made the economy more efficient. And to my mind, that's one of the best reasons to support a financial speculation tax.